Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from CRT Designs, and today I have this elegant white and gold feather A2 card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So to start, I am going to create kind of a window panel that I really wanted to make for this card. So I have my panel on top of my A2 base here. Because I want to cut the circle hole through my panel into my base, I'm actually going to lay them on top of each other and tape them together. I am going to tape the card open because I don't want it to put the circle into the back of my card base, but I do want it to cut through the front. And then this also kind of gives me a guideline as to where the die needs to go back in for the card panel. So you can see here that I just used some mint tape to adhere it. Now mint tape is a low tack tape, but in this instance, I don't know if it's just because the die plates pushed it together or it was just really sticky because I had just taken it off the roll. This was a bit stickier than I had hoped. So I am going to fix that here in a little bit, but I just really carefully separated the mint tape from where it was adhered to my base and my panel because I really didn't want to rip my cardstock. So I do have my white base is my heavyweight cardstock that I always like to use, and then the panel is a piece of HammerMill cardstock, which is kind of my preferred cardstock just because it's so versatile. But I mean, of course, you could literally use anything and that would be fine. So I did see, you can see that ring there. So I can easily pop my little circle die. And this is from my nested circles. Easily pop that back into the same area and then run it through my die cutting machine. And then it will cut out that circle in the exact same spot. So for that, I did leave my panel the exact same size as my card base. So that A2 size, the 5.5 by 4.25, so that they would line up. And then I'm going to trim it down a little later. And there's a little piece of mint tape there, but that was easy to remove after the fact. So then I brought in the Tim Holtz Feathery wafer dies. These are brand new, came out for the Halloween chapter, which came out, I believe, August 1st. So I'm going to cut two of them out of Tonic's Gold Pearl cardstock, and then I'm going to cut that last one out of another piece of HammerMill cardstock. This is just because I wanted a bit of color variation. So I kind of just thought the two gold, so this card, the whole of the card is going to be white and gold. So that's kind of what I was thinking there. And I mean, you could do two white ones and one gold one. It really doesn't matter. It's just that I was trying to bring in a bit more gold to what I was creating. And then I did put that last one through and then there's 6 feather dies in the die set. These are just the 3 I chose to use for this because you guys know that I like to work in odd numbers. So there's no really real rhyme or reason. You could have brought in more. You could have used different feathers. Really, I mean, you could use a different die if you really wanted to. So here I'm stamping my sentiment, and I should have gone the other direction because, of course, you can't, like, there's no way I'd be able to open the base that way, but I'd already laid my stamp down, so I was too lazy to change the direction of my card. So I just put my little panel on top since they're still going to line up perfectly, and then I just lined it up so to make sure that that was going to stamp where you could see it through the window. And then I'm just going to stamp on the base. So the stamp is from a Simon Says Stamp Orchid Rose Bouquet stamp set, and it just has some really beautiful sentiments in it, and this is one of them. And I just stamped it down with some Delicata Golden Glitz ink, which is my preferred gold ink. It is a pigment ink, so it does take a little while to dry. I got a bit impatient with it, and I did stamp it twice. I got a bit impatient waiting for it to dry, so I did actually hit this with my heat tool, which warped my base a little bit. So, I mean, if you could walk away and just let it dry naturally, that would be better, but I tend to be a bit impatient when I craft, so I kind of did warp the base a little bit, but it worked out okay in the end. So I'm going to trim off about 1/4 of an inch on each side. So I'm taking about an 1/8 of an inch off each side. So it's 1/4 of an inch shorter on each side, or sorry, on both sides. And then I'm just going to show you here that there is still a little bit of glue left on there from that mint tape. So I just brought in an adhesive eraser and it rubbed it off really easily. So there was no concerns there. It's just because I didn't want other things to stick to it. This isn't really necessary. I mean, it's a low tack tape, so it wasn't really sticky, but I have an adhesive eraser, so it was just easy to use to get that adhesive off. And then to add some texture to my panel, I'm going to run it through my favorite embossing folder, and this is the Simon Says Stamp Crystal Distortion 3D embossing folder, and I do run that through my Big Shot. So I don't show it on camera because my Big Shot actually sits on the other side of the room. So I just take it over to my Big Shot and run it through. I like to run it through twice, once forwards and once backwards, and then that's it for it. And I just love that embossing folder. It's by far my favorite. Now this step is definitely extra. This is just because I love all the shiny glittery things, and so I think everything needs extra glitter. By no means do you need to do this step. You could have left these feathers alone and they would still be stunning. So for this, I used some Stickles, I think it's called Stardust, and I just kind of dry brushed it onto the feathers. And my supervisor showed up in the middle to make sure that I was doing this right. And I just left this in because it's really funny. She actually ends up chasing my paintbrush, which I thought was hilarious. And you can't really even see it here. I tried to show you, but you can't really see it. And I did try to use my finger a little bit, but that didn't really work. So I had to kind of get a little more Stickles, and then I'm going to bring that brush back in. And I'm just kind of dry brushing the glitter in flicks across my feather. And here she's going to start chasing the end of my paint. But there we go. See, she's trying to get it. But this is how she supervises. She's just so helpful. And I just left that in because I'll get a lot of questions about my cats, and I know you guys like to see them, so I just like to leave the little pieces of them in if they come to visit. So she just kept trying to help me by biting my paintbrush, but I just thought that was super cute, so I left that little chunk in there. And I just dry brushed a bunch of that glitter across each feather just to add a little added texture. By no means, again, do you need to do that. And then I brought in my Nuvo Deluxe glue, and I'm going to adhere my panel down to my card base. So this is a bit fun because you kind of have to line it up with the hole and line it up so it's even on each side. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to worry about that, leave it in the A2 size. You don't need this border. It's just because I'm a little extra and I like a little bit extra things, but you could leave it as the A2 size and it would be easier to line it up. And then I just used my Misti to kind of weigh it down so that I wasn't concerned with it not adhering properly because there's so much texture there. And then I brought in that same Nuvo Deluxe glue, and now I'm going to adhere down my feathers. So I kind of had them laid out how I wanted them to look. In the end, honestly, I'm not super happy with how they ended up laying, just because you kind of can't tell their feathers. I mean, you guys let me know. Can you tell that they're feathers when all three of them are down? Like, this is not my favorite layout I've ever done. Don't get me wrong, I think the card is beautiful. I love this card. I think that I love white and gold together. I always think it looks really stunning. But my layout didn't quite turn out how I saw it in my head. So I'll have to try this again at a later date with a different kind of design. But the feathers are so pretty that I feel like I almost didn't do them justice here. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. So I have all three adhered down here, and they just went flat so that this would be an easy card to mail if I wanted to. And I do bring in an acrylic block just to weigh them down to make sure that they're not going to lift while there's all that texture. And now I'm going to trim off the little ends of the feathers that is kind of sticking out there. I brought in my trimmer for this. You could absolutely just use some scissors. I mean, it's not difficult. It's just that my trimmer happened to be sitting there from when I trimmed down the panel, so it was already sitting on my desk right beside me, so I figured it would be easier. And I mean, you don't have to trim that off. Theoretically, you could have left that on there and then just made an envelope for it that would have fit the tails. I chose to trim them off. And I brought in some Studio Katia Icy Sparkle crystals. These are just really pretty. Again, not necessary. Like, you don't have to add crystals. I want everything to be as sparkly as humanly possible, so I have a tendency to add a lot of bling to my stuff. But I did have a little bit of struggle trying to get the crystals to adhere just because there's so much texture from that 3D embossing folder. But I just kind of pressed them down with my finger at first, and then with the tip, the other side of that wand that I laid the crystals down with. So I'm going to show this to you up close. I think it turned out really pretty. I'd love to know what you guys hear. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.